At my son's funeral, I stood beside his casket, holding the program so tightly that the paper cut into my palm. My daughter-in-law leaned in close, her breath brushing against my ear. In a low voice, she whispered, "You're overreacting. You were never really family." I didn't look at her. I didn't answer. I just kept my eyes on the wooden box holding my son, pretending I hadn't heard the words that felt like broken glass stuck inside me. All around us, people whispered kind things about David Watt, a good man he'd been. They remembered how he always called me on Sundays, how he never forgot to hug me first at family gatherings, how he'd leave little birthday cards in my kitchen even after he was married. He was that kind of son. And now, he was gone. When the service ended, Sarath, the same woman who'd just cut me down with her words, was dabbing her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Standing with her work friends, their quiet chatter stopped. The second I came near, I didn't try to join them. I just stood off to the side, holding my purse like it was the only thing keeping me steady. A man I didn't know pressed a white rose into my hand and told me to take care of myself. I nodded, even though, in that moment, I didn't feel like I existed at all. Later, Sarah offered to drive me home. Her hand rested on my shoulder, but it didn't feel kind. It felt like an order. I sat in the passenger seat of David's old car, staring straight ahead while the scent of his cologne lingered in the fabric. Neither of us spoke during the ride. When we pulled into the driveway, she didn't wait for me to open the door. She shut off the engine, turned to me, and calmly said, "I've decided it's best if you start looking for somewhere else to stay. I'm listing the house on Monday. Once the paperwork is filed, you'll have 48 hours. Her voice was flat, as if she were suggesting I switch laundry detergent instead of telling me to leave my home. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My ears rang, and my tongue felt heavy. She tilted her head, her wedding ring catching the light, and added, "It's just too much space now. I need a clean start." I got out of the car and forced my legs to carry me inside. The first thing I saw was a cardboard box in the hallway with Mom's room scrawled across it in Sarah's handwriting. My chest tightened. In my room, the photo of David and me at his graduation was gone from the nightstand. The quilt I had made was folded on the floor. In its place sat a realtor's folder, open to a checklist titled Pre-Listing Tasks. I sat on the edge of the bed, reading every line, like maybe I'd misunderstood, like maybe this was a mistake, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Sarah had been waiting for this moment. From the day David asked me to move in after my husband died, she had smiled politely, but it never felt real. She liked things spotless, controlled, hers, and I was always a reminder that the house wasn't just hers. I put the folder back exactly as I found it and began quietly pulling clothes from drawers. I didn't know where I would go, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let her see me break. That evening, I heard her in the kitchen answering condolence calls, her voice smooth and practiced. "Thank you. Yes, we are doing as well as can be expected," as if she was the only one grieving. I stayed in my room, packing box after box until my back ached and my throat was dry. When I finally stepped into the kitchen for a glass of water, she looked up from her laptop. For a moment, she just stared at me like she'd forgotten I still lived there. She didn't say a word. I didn't either. I just drank the water in one long gulp, set the glass down, and went back to my room. "I know this is hard, Mary, but it's for the best. David would want me to move on." That's what Sarah said, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open like she was handling business. For the first time that day, I looked her straight in the eye. "You don't get to decide what David would have wanted," I told her. My voice was steady, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. She blinked, her face completely blank, then turned back to her screen, as if I hadn't just spoken, as if I hadn't just fought to hold on to the last bit of dignity I had left. I went back to my room and sat down on the edge of the bed, the sheets stripped away like I was already gone. My mind kept circling the same memories of David, how he'd make sure my favorite creamer was always in the fridge, how he'd leave little notes if he was working late. He made sure I never felt forgotten. And now, here I was, in a cold house that felt like it didn't want me in it, with a woman who couldn't even wait until my son was in the ground before she started pushing me out. But I didn't cry. Maybe because crying would have meant she'd won. Instead, I picked up my phone and called the only person I could think of, Evelyn, one of David's old co-workers. She'd hugged me at the funeral like she actually meant it. When she answered, I didn't bother with hello. I just whispered, "I think I need help." She was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I'm on my way." For the first time all day, I didn't feel completely alone. I sat there for a long time after, staring at the boxers half filled with my life, replaying Sarah's words. "You were never really family." She'd been holding that in for years. And then I remembered how all of this started. 8 years ago, David called one night sounding embarrassed. He told me they were trying to buy the house, but the bank wanted a bigger down payment, and the loan had been denied. He didn't outright ask me, but I could hear the need in his voice. After my husband died, I sold our house, and most of the money had been sitting untouched in savings, so I told David I'd help. He argued at first, but I insisted. I didn't need a big house anymore. I just wanted his family to be stable. We signed the papers making me part owner. David was so grateful. He hugged me right there in the bank, and that night he brought home a little cake with our family home written in blue icing. He even kept the cashier's check receipt and deed in a folder labeled Home Documents. He promised I'd always have a place here. That was the last time I ever truly felt welcome. Thinking about it now, sitting on that empty bed, I realized that folder might be the only thing keeping Sarah from tossing me out like trash. I grabbed my purse and went to the garage. The door was locked. I tried the keypad, but it flashed red. She'd already changed the code. My stomach tightened, but I didn't stop. I slipped through the side gate into the garage and turned on the light. My heart hammered as I went straight to the old filing cabinet David always used. I tore through the drawers, insurance papers, tax forms, car titles, everything but what I needed. The last drawer jammed, and I had to brace my foot against the cabinet to wrench it open. Buried under old warranty booklets, I found a brown accordion folder wrapped with a rubber band. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped it. Inside were the deed papers with both our names, the cashier's check, and the settlement statement's proof that part of this house was mine. I shoved the folder into my purse just as the kitchen door creaked open. Sarah stood there, dressed sharp in black slacks and a blouse like she was on her way to a meeting. Her eyes flicked from my face to the bulging purse. "What are you doing out here?" she asked, her voice cold and flat, like she'd been expecting this moment. "I'm getting my things," I said, trying to sound calm. She stepped forward, stopping just inside the doorway. "That's private property." I looked her in the eye. "I own part of this house. Nothing here is off limits to me." She didn't argue. She just stared at me, her lips pressed in a hard line. Then she said quietly, "You need to leave tonight." I didn't answer. I walked past her, through the kitchen, and into the hallway. My palms were sweating against my purse straps, the folder inside like a heartbeat I couldn't hide. I knew she suspected what I had, but for the first time, I felt like I had something she couldn't take from me. I was halfway to the door when the doorbell rang. For a second, both of us froze. Then Sarah moved first, her hand gliding over the knob like she was still in control. On the porch stood Evelyn, wearing jeans and a plain cardigan, holding a grocery bag. She didn't even glance at Sarah. Her eyes were on me. "Hi, Mary," she said softly. "Can I come in?" Sarah shifted in front of the doorway, blocking her. "This isn't a good time," she said, her voice slipping into that fake polite tone she used with strangers. But Evelyn didn't budge. She just kept her steady gaze on me. "I think it's exactly the right time," she said, and something in her voice made my chest loosen. I nodded once. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she stepped aside. "Fine," she muttered. Evelyn walked in and set the bag on the hall table. She reached inside and pulled out a small flash drive sealed in a clear Ziploc. She held it out to me. "David asked me to give you this if anything ever happened to him," she said. My breath caught. "When did She cut me off, gently. "A few months ago. He said he was updating his will and some personal files. He didn't explain, just told me to hold on to this." Sarah's eyes narrowed, but she stayed silent. I closed my hand around the drive, the hard edges pressing into my skin. "Thank you," I whispered. Evelyn gave a small nod. "I'll wait outside," she said, and without once looking at Sarah, she stepped back onto the porch. The second the door shut, Sarah's mask slipped. "You're pathetic," she hissed, running to his friends for help. "You think a stupid flash drive is going to change anything?" I didn't answer. I just walked past her, down the hall, into my room. I shoved the folder deeper into my purse, zipped it shut, and grabbed my suitcase. Behind me, her voice followed like a buzzing mosquito. "You're leaving. Where will you even go? You can't stay here, Mary. You'll regret this." I didn't look back. At the front door, I stopped just long enough to catch my breath. my hand firm on the knob. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see her standing there with her arms crossed. "You're right about one thing," I said, my voice steady. "I'm leaving tonight." And then I walked out, shutting the door behind me. Evelyn was waiting by her car. She opened the passenger door without a word. I slid in, set my purse on my lap, and finally let out the breath I'd been holding since the funeral. The drive to the motel was quiet. I sat with the flash drive in my palm like it was the last piece of David I had left. When we pulled in, Evelyn parked and turned to me. "If you need anything, you call me," she said firmly. "Anything at all." I nodded, my throat too tight for words. She reached over, squeezed my hand, and whispered, "I'm sorry. He deserved better." I swallowed hard. We both did. She waited until I was inside before driving away. The motel room was small, just a bed, a table, and a lamp, but for the first time all day, I wasn't surrounded by Sarah's shadow. I sat on the bed, pulled out my laptop, and plugged in the flash drive. There was only one file. For Mom. The screen flickered, and then David's face filled it. He was sitting at his desk, wearing the blue shirt I'd given him for Christmas. He looked tired. "If you're watching this," he began, his voice rough, "it means I'm gone. And I'm sorry for that. But I need you to know something important." I pressed my fist to my mouth to keep from making a sound. "I tried to protect you," he went on, "but I don't think I did enough. Sarah's been hiding things, debts. She used my name to take out a line of credit on the house. I found out last month. I was going to tell you." He looked away, then back again. "If she tries to force you out, don't let her. You have rights. The deed is still in your name. Get help if you need it." "I'm sorry I didn't do more." The screen went black, leaving only my reflection staring back at me. I sat frozen, feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath me. The grief and anger twisted together, but instead of breaking me, they hardened into something else. I closed the laptop, pulled the brown folder from my purse, and spread everything out on the motel bed. The deed, the cashier's check receipt, the settlement statement, and now the flash drive. My hands were still shaking, but for the first time, I had proof. Proof that Sarah couldn't erase me. Proof that David hadn't left me as powerless as she wanted me to believe. She thought she'd already won. She had no idea what I had now. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the contacts until I found the name David had once insisted I save: Ben Garcia, a lawyer he trusted. David had used him years ago for some job contract issue, and I remembered him saying, "He's solid. If you ever need someone, call him." My thumb hovered over the call button for a long time before I finally pressed it. The receptionist who answered sounded so polite it nearly broke me. My voice came out thin and scratchy as I explained who I was and why I was calling. She told me Mr. Garcia was in court that morning but could meet me in the afternoon. I gave her the name of my motel, hung up, and then just lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering how I was supposed to fill the next 4 hours. Eventually, I forced myself downstairs to the front desk and asked if there was a coffee shop nearby. The young man behind the counter handed me a paper map without even looking up. I walked 2 blocks to a little diner, ordered toast and coffee, and sat at a booth by the window. But when the food came, I couldn't swallow more than a few bites. My stomach felt like it was tied in knots, wet and heavy, pulling me down. All I could think about was David's face in that video, the way he couldn't even look directly at the camera when he said he hadn't done enough. He had always spent his life making sure everyone else was okay. And now I was the one left trying to protect the promises he'd made. When it was finally time, I gathered every paper into my purse, checking the room 3 times to be sure I hadn't left anything behind. I called a cab. The ride felt longer than it probably was. I stared out the window but didn't really see anything. My hand stayed pressed against the folder in my lap like it was the only thing holding me steady. Part of me still wondered if I was overreacting, if Sarah was right, if grief was clouding my mind, but then I remembered her voice the night before, calling me pathetic, telling me I'd regret leaving. That was enough. I took a deep breath, paid the driver, and climbed out. Inside the law office, the receptionist greeted me kindly and offered water, which I declined. I sat in the corner clutching my purse like it was an anchor. A few minutes later, a tall man in a gray suit stepped out. His face was serious, but when his eyes met mine, there was warmth there. "Mrs. Wilson," he said gently, "I'm Ben Garcia. Let's talk." I followed him into his office. The walls were lined with framed degrees, everything neat and orderly. He gestured for me to sit. I'm very sorry for your loss, he began, his voice calm but sincere. I nodded, my chest twisting all over again. Thank you, I whispered. He waited, giving me space, then leaned forward slightly. Tell me everything. So I did. I told him about David's death, about Sarah whispering at the funeral that I was never really family, about the boxes, the threats, the locks she'd already changed. I told him about the brown folder, the deed, the cashier's check, and the video David had left for me. My throat burned by the time I finished. My hands cramped from how tightly I'd been holding them. Mr. Garcia hadn't interrupted once. He just listened, steady and focused. When I was done, he leaned forward. May I see the documents and the video? He asked. My hand trembled as I passed them across the desk. He opened the folder and went through each page carefully, jotting notes on a yellow legal pad. When he finished, he set everything down and looked me straight in the eye. You have a very strong case here, he said evenly. Your name is on the deed. You contributed financially. Her attempt to evict you isn't legally valid. I felt something loosen in my chest for the first time in days. But before I could exhale, he held up a finger. However, he continued, she may still try to force your hand by painting you as unstable. If she files an emergency motion, claiming you're a threat or unfit, a judge could issue a temporary removal order. My mouth went dry. She already said she'd make me look unstable, I whispered. He nodded once. That's often the tactic. But you have ducked. The video is crucial. David acknowledged your rights and clearly anticipated this. That will carry weight in court. He set the papers down carefully. The next step is to file a notice of intent to retain occupancy and a motion to block any sale or transfer of the house. Do you want to proceed? My chest tightened, but this time, my voice didn't shake. Yes, I said firmly. He nodded, picked up the phone, and gave calm instructions to someone in the next room. When he hung up, he turned back to me. Mr. Garcia said they'd draft everything that day. In the meantime, I was not to return to the house alone. If Sarah contacted me, I had to record everything. She has my things, I said quietly. My clothes, some of David's. Be considered. That will include a request for supervised retrieval. It will almost certainly be granted. My eyes stung, but I managed. Thank you. He rested his hand on the folder. You did the right thing coming here. For a second, I thought I might break, but I pressed my palm flat against my thigh until the feeling passed. He stood, walked me out, and promised to be in touch by the end of the day. The receptionist gave me a small, encouraging smile as I left. Back at the motel, I locked the door and set the folder on the table. I sat on the bed, too drained to move. To fill the silence, I called Evelyn. I saw the lawyer, I said flatly. He says, I have a case. I knew you would, she said softly. How are you holding up? That question nearly undid me. I don't know. Do you want company? I hesitated, then shook my head, though she couldn't see. Not right now. All right, call me if you change your mind. After we hung up, I lay back and stared at the ceiling. My vision blurred like I was underwater. For a while, I tried to remember what it felt like in that house before Sarah made me feel like a burden. I thought about the night David called to tell me Leo was born, his voice bright with hope, certain everything was finally coming together. I pressed my hand over my eyes, telling myself not to cry, but the tears came anyways, slow, hot, unstoppable. I cried for David, for Leo, for the life that had been chipped away, piece by piece, while I kept convincing myself that silence was the right choice. When the tears finally eased, I felt hollow. I wiped my face with the corner of the sheet. There was a voicemail waiting from Mr. Garcia. I've filed the emergency motion. She'll be served by morning. Stay where you are. You're doing everything right. I set the phone down and closed my eyes. That was enough for today. Tonight, I could just be a mother who missed her son. Tomorrow, I would be the woman who made sure Sarah couldn't erase me. The next morning, I almost ignored the call. I'd barely slept. David's video looping in my head. I thought it was Evelyn checking in, but the number was unfamiliar. The voice on the line introduced himself as a deputy marshal. He was calling to let me know the injunction had been granted. Sarah would be served within the hour. She was barred from selling the property, transferring it, or trying to evict me without a court order. I thanked him, pressing my hand hard against my eyes as he explained the details. Relief wasn't what I felt, it was a shift, the weight on my shoulders settling into a different heaviness. This was far from over. I forced myself to eat a few crackers from the vending machine, then sat back down on the bed. I knew Sarah, she would not take this quietly. To her, this wasn't about grief. It was about control. Sure enough, less than 2 hours later, her name flashed across my phone. I let it ring. When she called again, I powered the phone off. I wasn't giving her the chance to twist my words. Instead, I called Mr. Garcia's office. His assistant confirmed the injunction had gone through and added that the court had already scheduled a hearing for the following week to formalize my claim. She sounded almost cheerful. I didn't. I hung up and stared at the folded receipt. From the cashier's check, remembering how proud David had been the day we signed the papers, he'd told me we had made something permanent together. The thought that Sarah might have been planning this for years made my stomach twist. I kept wondering, had she always resented me, or did it grow slowly, fed by small grudges, until there was nothing kind left between us? I didn't get long to think. Around noon, Evelyn called, her voice low and urgent. She asked if I was sitting down. My chest tightened. I said yes, bracing for bad news. She told me Sarah had just posted something online, a black and white photo of David holding Leo as a baby, with a long caption. Sarah wrote about grief, about being harassed and threatened, about fearing for her child's safety because certain family members refused to respect boundaries. She never used my name, but she didn't need to. Anyone who knew us would know who she meant. Evelyn read part of it aloud, disgust in her voice. When she finished, it felt like a cold hand pressed against my spine. I thanked her for telling me and promised I'd stay put. After we hung up, I opened the motel Wi-Fi and found the post myself. It was already filling with comments. "You're so strong. Nobody deserves this. We've got your back." Then, one that made me slam the laptop shut. Some people can't let go of control, even when it's time to move on. For a moment, rage burned hot, but beneath it was shame. The shame of knowing people will believe whatever story sounds easiest. I pressed my palm flat against the table and breathed deep. If I tried to defend myself online, it would look petty. That was her game: push until you react, then hold up. Your reaction is proof. I asked myself what David would want me to do. He wouldn't want me to hide, but he also wouldn't want me to sink to her level. Then the phone rang. Mr. Garcia. He'd seen the post too. His advice was clear: don't engage. The best answer is evidence, not emotion. For the first time in days, I felt steadier. Before hanging up, he asked if I'd thought about going to the local news. Sometimes, he said, a neutral record of the facts was the best defense. I hadn't considered it, but the longer I sat there, the more it made sense. Sarah was counting on me to stay quiet. I found the number for the local paper and stared at it for a long moment before pressing call. The reporter, Marisa, sounded young, but she really listened. As I explained everything, she asked if I had proof. I told her yes. She asked if I'd share it. After a pause, I said yes. She arrived at the motel a few hours later, serious but polite. I laid everything out on the table. The deed, the receipt, the flash drive. She took notes, photos, recordings, asking me to walk through it all from the beginning. When she finished, she said she'd reach out to Sarah for comment before running the piece. I knew that would enrage Sarah, but I didn't care anymore. By the time Marisa left, I was exhausted. I pulled the curtains shut and sat on the bed. Then my phone buzzed with a new voicemail. It was Sarah. Her voice was sharp, almost breaking. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're destroying what's left of this family. If you care about Leo at all, you'll stop this now." I listened twice. Then I forwarded it straight to Mr. Garcia without replying. Afterward, I just sat there, staring at the wall. My mind drifted back to the day David brought Leo home from the hospital. How Sarah had let me hold him first, like she trusted me then. I thought about all the dinners where Sarah had smiled across the table. All the times I told myself that if I stayed out of the way, things would be fine. None of it mattered now. When the phone buzzed again, I didn't even check. I powered it off and set it face down. That night, lying on the stiff motel bed, my mind replayed every moment that had led me here. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt empty. But under the emptiness was a thin, steady thread of something stronger. Knowledge that, for the first time in years, I wasn't letting someone else decide what I was allowed to keep. I pulled the covers up and told myself that tomorrow I'd be ready for whatever Sarah tried next. The next morning, Mr. Garcia texted. The newspaper article would go live by noon. Be prepared for fallout, he wrote. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, struck by how strange it felt that something as simple as telling the truth could feel like a risk. My stomach churned, but I got dressed and made sure every document and copy was tucked safely in my purse. By 10 Evelyn called. She didn't waste time with small talk. It's up, she said. My heart thudded hard. I pulled up the website. There it was. The headline in bold black letters. Grieving mother fights eviction after son's death. They'd used a photo of David and me at his college graduation, the one Sarah had once taken from my nightstand. Seeing it nearly closed my throat, but I forced myself to read. The article was thorough. It explained the deed, the money I'd contributed, the timeline of Sarah's eviction attempt. It quoted Mr. Garcia, confirming my legal standing. It mentioned that Sarah had declined to comment, except to say she was focused on protecting her family's future. When I finished, I felt something I hadn't in weeks: relief. A small, hard spark of it. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. I had proof. But relief didn't last. Within the hour, my phone was buzzing nonstop with unknown numbers. I ignored them, but the notifications kept piling up. By noon, Evelyn texted again. Sarah had posted a video. In it, she sat crying, on the couch with Leo beside her. She said she didn't understand why I was trying to ruin their lives, that she was just a widow trying to protect her child. She said she'd always welcomed me into their home and couldn't understand why I'd turned on her. My hands shook so badly I had to set the phone down. I wanted to scream that she was lying, that she was the one who'd turned. But I knew it didn't matter. People believed the story that was easiest to pity. What tore me apart wasn't the story, was Leo, sitting there, hearing her say those words. I called Mr. Garcia. He sighed. Predictable, he said. She was just trying to sway sympathy before the hearing. He reminded me that I didn't have to respond. The truth was already on my side. After we hung up, I forced myself to get dressed properly, to brush my hair, to look like someone who wasn't falling apart. Around 2, Deputy Marshal called. Sarah had been formally served with the injunction. I had the right to return to the property, with an officer present, to ensure no disturbance. The thought of going back made my stomach twist, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. My things were still there. If I stayed away, it would feel like admitting she'd won. I called a cab. When it arrived, I climbed in, clutching my purse like it was a life preserver. The driver said nothing, and I was grateful for the silence. When we pulled into the neighborhood, my throat tightened. The house looked the same as always, except now Sarah's car was in the driveway, alongside a black SUV I didn't recognize. I paid the driver and stepped out. A patrol car pulled in behind me. Deputy Marshal got out, his expression neutral. You ready, ma'am? The deputy asked. I nodded, though my palms were slick with sweat. We walked up the path together. He knocked, firm and steady. After a pause, Sarah opened the door. Her face was pale, tight. None of us spoke at first. Then, she stepped back, arms crossed. You can come in, she said flatly. I walked past her into the foyer, ignoring the way her eyes followed me. The house felt smaller, cluttered with boxes and things I didn't recognize. Mrs. Wilson is here to collect her belongings, the deputy said. Sarah didn't answer. She just turned and disappeared into the kitchen. I went to my old room. First, my drawers had been emptied onto the bed. Piece by piece, I sifted through the mess, packing clothes, framed photos, the little jewelry box David had given me. At the bottom of the closet, I found the quilt I'd made, crumpled like it meant nothing. I folded it carefully and set it in the suitcase. In the study, everything was just as David had left it: books on the shelves, papers stacked on the desk. My throat tightened. On the desk was a wooden box I didn't recognize. Inside was an envelope with my name in David's handwriting. My vision blurred. I slipped it into my purse without opening it. When I turned, Sarah was in the doorway, her face unreadable. I don't know why you're doing this, she said, her voice low. I'm just trying to survive. You're trying to survive by erasing me, I said quietly. Her chin lifted. You never belonged here. My grip tightened on my purse. You're wrong. I belonged here before you ever did. She turned and walked away. I stood there, breathing hard, before stepping past her. All set? The deputy asked. Yes. He carried my suitcase out. As we stepped onto the porch, Sarah's voice rang out behind me. You'll regret this. I didn't look back. At the curb, I thanked the deputy. climbed into the cab, and shut the door. As the car pulled away, something inside me loosened. The house hadn't been mine for a long time, but now, I wasn't pretending anymore. Back at the motel, I didn't unpack. I didn't even sit down. I set my purse on the table and pulled out the envelope. My hands shook as I opened it. David's handwriting filled the page. He began by saying he was sorry he hadn't been braver sooner. He wrote that Sarah had debts she was hiding, that she'd opened credit cards in his name and shuffled money between accounts. He thought he could fix it, that if he worked hard enough, he could catch up before it all collapsed. He said he never wanted me to feel like a burden, that moving me into the house was something he wanted, not an obligation. He told me he was proud of the way I'd rebuilt after Dad died, that he respected me more than I ever knew. The words blurred as I tried to keep reading. I pressed my hand over my mouth, trying to hold back the sob, but it broke out anyway, a rough, painful sound I couldn't control. For a moment, I let it all hit me, the sadness, the guilt, and strangely, a little relief that at least he left me with one clear truth. When I could finally breathe again, I kept reading his letter. In the last lines, he asked me to promise I wouldn't let Sarah take everything. He told me not to believe her lies, that I belonged wherever I chose to belong. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table. My chest still ached, but the pain felt different now, like something heavy was finally breaking apart so something stronger could grow in its place. I wiped my face, turned my phone back on, and saw dozens of missed calls and messages, most from Sarah, some from numbers I didn't know. I ignored them all. Instead, I called Mr. Garcia and told him I wanted to move forward with the legal case to claim my share of the property and get damages covered. He said the paperwork was already ready. His calm, steady voice gave me strength. After that, I called Evelyn. When she answered, I didn't pretend I was fine. I read her the letter through tears. She was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I'm glad he left you something real." I closed my eyes. "Me too," I whispered. I told her I'd be staying at the motel until the hearing. She offered to come sit with me, but I said I needed a little time alone. She understood. That night, I packed only what I truly needed: my documents, the letter, a change of clothes. I wanted to be ready for whatever came next. The next morning, I called the clerk's office to confirm the hearing date. After hanging up, I found myself staring at a framed picture of David on the dresser. I remembered how proud he was the day he helped me move in. How sure he was this was the start of something good. The memory made my heart ache, but it didn't crush me like before. Later, I finally listened to one of Sarah's old voicemails. Her voice was shaky but sharp. She said, "I don't know what you think you're proving. All you're doing is hurting Leo. He doesn't understand why you're trying to take his home." My stomach twisted. Leo was the only reason I'd ever hesitated, but I knew deep down that giving in to Sarah wasn't going to protect him. He deserved stability, not lies. I didn't call her back. Instead, I called the family court clerk to ask about temporary guardianship. She explained I'd need proof Sarah wasn't fit to care for him. I wrote everything down. For the first time in weeks, I felt calmer, like I finally had a plan. I spent the rest of the day organizing my papers and labeling everything for court. That night, I read David's letter again, letting his words fill the empty places inside me. I slept deeper than I had in weeks. The next morning, Mr. Garcia called. He said Sarah had filed a motion claiming I forged David's signature on the deed. My stomach dropped, but then he reminded me we had the original documents and the recording. "She won't get far with this," he said. I swallowed hard. "She never stopped, will she?" He was quiet, then said, "Probably not, but she doesn't get to decide the outcome." After that call, I sat for a long time thinking about all the years I'd let Sarah control me. Every time I stayed quiet to keep the peace. Every time, I convinced myself it wasn't worth the fight. Not anymore. By noon, I had checked out of the motel and dropped off copies of my documents with Evelyn, just in case. She squeezed my hand and said, "You're doing the right thing." I nodded. "I know." Then I drove straight to the courthouse. I sat in the parking lot for 20 long minutes before I finally walked in. The clerk handed me a stack of forms to sign. This time, my hands didn't shake. When I finished and stepped outside, the bright afternoon sun hit me, and it felt like I was stepping into a stronger version of myself, someone who wasn't afraid anymore. That evening, sitting in the small rented room I'd found, I read David's letter once more. I thought about how hard he had tried to protect me, even when he couldn't protect himself. I thought about Leo, and how one day he'd be old enough to know the truth. I thought about Sarah, and how she had underestimated me from the start. For the first time since David died, I felt something close to peace. I knew the fight wasn't over, but I also knew I wasn't going to fight with fear anymore. I was going to fight with strength, with everything I had left. And no matter what Sarah did, she was never going to take that away from me. So tell me honestly, did I do the right thing? That's today's story. If it touched you, leave a like and subscribe. And don't forget, share your own life lesson in the comments below.